Hello, my name is Jeremy Fisher, and this is the Memento design pattern. So what is the Memento design pattern? Well, it's a design pattern used to save states of objects, and because you're able to save those states, you're also able to restore previous states. The textbook example of this is using a text editor, undo and redo. So if you were writing in docs and you were to type out a sentence, you can Control Z to undo that. I found this to be simpler than the command patterns implementation of the undo redo because you have to save all these different commands, whereas this is simply just saving the data and overwriting the current state's data with the previous state's data. So looking at the UML diagram, we have the originator, and in Unity, for example, we're going to be attaching this to the object, the game object, that we want to save the state. So we're going to have the ability to save a state, which is going to create a memento, and we're also going to have the ability to restore a state by receiving a memento and changing the game object's data. So the memento itself is simply just going to be a class, an object that we're able to save all sorts of data in. So this could be things like health points, the player's position, etc. And we're going to have a caretaker that is able to hold all of these previous states, and then tell the originator or tell the game object to revert to those original states. And we'll get into that later, and that'll be way more clear in just a few seconds. So again, the Unity example we're going to look at is player save points. So say we might want to save the player's state in certain save points. So as they go into a new room, we save the game for them, kind of like a quick save. We want to be able to save things like position, health, etc. We can use the memento of that player state. This is also sometimes just called state, not momentum. But once those methods are created, we're able to create things, we're able to use them in things like Unity events that trigger saves and restores on death. So in Unity, I have the example of this character here. This is just a basic paid package for horror games. Kind of sets up a template for you. But the idea is that we want this player to be able to walk through this house, and if they get killed by the monster, say, we spawn them back. And a more ignorant or inexperienced way of doing this would be simply reloading the scene, because this would put the player back and it would reset all the states of all the objects in the scene, including the player. But the problem is that's going to force the player, the actual player, the human being, to reload the entire scene, which can be computationally expensive as our game gets more and more complicated with advanced shaders and objects. So instead, we're going to keep the scene open, but we're going to simply teleport the player back by saving its state. So let's get on to looking at the scripts. So the first thing you want to do with this design pattern is think about all the things we want to save. And in this case, we want to save the player's X, Y, and Z of a given player transform. And the reason why I didn't pass in the transform itself is because in Unity, you'd be passing by the reference, and actually if you were to save the transform in here and you were to grab that transform, you'd be teleporting yourself to your current self. So we need to save the actual numbers itself instead of a reference. And I didn't want to have to do a crazy way to actually make a new copy of the object. So I just did this for simplicity's sake. So now looking at the player originator, we have the ability to save the game by creating a new player memento by passing in the player's transform. So we can look back here, look how this transform gets thrown in here, and we save the X, Y, and Z to that transform's X, Y, and Z. And again, you could put all sorts of things in here. We might have the player's health, we might have all of the amount of items they have, all those sorts of things would be going into this constructor, going into this state right here. Finally, we have restore, which is like redoing, right? We want to receive a memento in this case, the previous state of the player, and we want to set that. So I simply just have the player's current position, and we set it to the mementos X, Y, and Z. Again, you would continue this method with anything else like previous health, the current health, and set it to the previous health, etc. So finally, looking at the player caretaker, we have first a serializable field that is the player originator. This is this script right here. Since it's a mono behavior, we're able to drag it into the inspector because we need to know which player originator to be saving and restoring from. I have the previous save memento, and currently in this implementation, I just have a single save memento, but this could easily be an array or more commonly a stack, so you can redo and undo in that stack fashion. Finally, I have this hit save and hit undo, and this is kind of like you're thinking when you're pressing Control Z, you're hitting undo. These could be things like a UI where we have the UI hit save, we have the UI to hit undo. This could be used in Unity events, but for the simplicity of this example, I have them in the context menu, which allows me to activate them in the inspector. But I also will show it being used in a Unity event like a collider, so you can see visualize how a save point could happen. So looking at the code, we simply say this save memento is the player originator.save, right? So that state gets saved immediately, and as the player moves around, gets hurt, gets damaged, this saved memento is in this caretaker. That's how you can kind of think of this. This caretaker takes care of all the states and manages how they're being used. And when the player restores the state, we have that restore memento. Again, if this was a stack, maybe if they maybe we would remove the top of the stack, and then if they were to hit undo again, we would look at that next element, and so on and so on. But for, again, simplicity's sake, I have just one. So let's look how this actually works in the game. It's pretty simple code, but you can see how this is powerful because we're able to keep adding any state we need. Say later on we add new things like their speed. Maybe they upgrade their speed. We can put their previous speed in here. All sorts of things. And we only have to edit 2 scripts, right? We have to edit the originator, how we save and restore, and the memento itself to add the data. So actually this time we will go see how this is used in Unity. So with the game running, you can see I'm able to move around and such, but if we were to look in the scene view, we have a trigger event right here. You can see this box collider, and we can save our character to this point right here. I simply have this box collider and a script, trigger event script, that takes the caretaker and hits saves, runs that method once we collide with this. So once we run over this, we were able to save our player state. And you can see in the bottom left here, we have that debug statement, so we know that it worked. The player state has been saved. And let's just say we walk through the house and some events happen, like a jump scare, and maybe that monster right there actually attacks us. So to simulate that, I'm going to click on the caretaker, right click on the caretaker script, and press restore state. And you can see that we're immediately thrown back to the save point. Now you notice that the lights are off, and this can be another thing that you save states, right? You can save the states of all the lights, the jump scares, etc. So you can see just how powerful this design pattern is and how simple it is to implement. I believe the simplicity of this design pattern is its most powerful asset, because things like the command pattern can get very complicated when you have to add all these different commands and you have to mess with all these different interfaces, when this provides a simple, fast way for you to save states and revert back to them. So I hope this presentation was helpful. I hope it can level up your game design.